So that's one self-care tip is to,
I love that.
if you haven't created goals, create goals around all areas of your life and maybe take the time to do that so that you feel this sense of security.
So Sunday, July 24th is International Self-Care Day. And I'll tell you, Tanya, you put this on our calendar and I had no idea there was such a thing. like a day dedicated for self-care. And yet, of course, every day in practice, I'm like, oh, we need to focus on our self-care. But I didn't realize that there's an actual day.
Right. What does it even mean? What does it mean to you to have self-care?
Well, that's a great question, because isn't it true that we're so busy, and as, entrepreneurs and practitioners that help other people, being moms, being a wife, just all those hats that we wear, I find that there's little room to even consider self-care, but yet really self-care is like the pinnacle of your health for yourself as well as all the people that you serve.
Right.
Right.
And you may, even if you feel like you're not doing self-care, perhaps you are a busy entrepreneur and hustle bustle, going all the time. You may not recognize that you already have like self-care infiltrated into your kind of whole regime, because goals themselves is a strategy. Like if you've set aside goals for yourself and that you're working towards, that's in and of itself is self-care. It is for me to have goals set aside and strategizing when I'm going to retire perhaps, or, how much time I'm going to allocate for relationships. Like maybe if you're a goal-oriented person and you have a super busy life, you probably already are doing self-care in and of itself. That is something that brings, comfort and safety to your mind, because you're taking care of everyone around you with goals, right? Like you've done goal setting. So that in and of itself is a form of self-care. So even if you haven't perhaps, taken the time to rest in peace today and meditate, which is what we often think of as self-care, it doesn't mean that you aren't, working towards self-care by having, strategizing and creating goals around self and relationships and business. Do you know what I mean?
I totally know.
Really,
yeah. And you know what? I love that you're saying this right from the get-go, because you're right. When I think of the word self-care, people may associate it with very specific things like, oh, I need to meditate more, do yoga more, do this and do that and do this and do that. And then that can get overwhelming. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't even have time for it. Yet really what you're saying is what can serve me as I serve others? And, honestly, in this day and age, most women are working. And so in terms of self-care in your working life, how do we take care of that piece? Instead of, just working the grind, maybe we reevaluate and say, hey, does this work align with my values?
Yes.
Can I do this forever? Or maybe I need to pivot and do something different. So I love that. That's a really great perspective.
Yeah, it's like a mindset. So self-care isn't about necessarily always doing, although that is something that's helpful to kind of embrace you first, like our previous podcast, right? Embrace that your the time for yourself. But part of that time is strategizing around goal setting and coming up with, goals that you probably have already set for relationships, for example, and in your business life. I'm sure you've allocated it separately, right? That goals for yourself and goals, right, Mary, and goals with your relationship with your daughter, your spouse, and then business goals. And then doing that as women, we feel kind of more safe and about our future, even when we have kind of structured goal setting. So that's one self-care tip is to,
I love that.
If you haven't created goals, create goals around all areas of your life and maybe take the time to do that so that you feel this sense of security. Because really instinctually, when we lived back in, nature, it was about safety was having this basically like not being eaten by a lion. And then it was, it's, having a roof over our head and finances and that kind of thing. And people worry a lot about money, right? So it's a matter of finding, within your life, like goals around like what works for you. So like financially, and then how are you going to also in alignment with that, like, make sure that you're making time for, like, I guess, structuring yourself to, do self-care, not just for the future and retirement, but like, how are you doing miniature things? Like, so turning to now, like, what are the weekly goals that you have for yourself that are going to kind of bring that sense of peace? Perhaps it's around like a little miniature, space, like we were saying before, like a vacation in your mind weekly, and then quarterly or monthly and quarterly with breaking it down, like with self, relationships, and business.
I love that. And that's really great. And because here's the thing, if we don't schedule it in, it kind of falls off the wayside. And I'm going to give you a silly example. I did microblading on my eyebrows.
Yes.
This is like, they say, oh, you should do it like every, 3 years or so, and sometimes less. But it's been like over 5-6 years. And I'm like, oh, you know what, maybe I should do that. But it's not going to happen if I don't, set aside time to actually create the appointment and then go into the appointment. So as you speak to this, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to go and actually, look at the calendar and schedule an appointment. Because if I don't, it's not going to happen. And there'll be another 10 years.
Great, by the way. No wonder they are looking so hot, Mary. I have little reminders that come up in my calendar. Go for your monthly waxing. If we're talking about like the physical self-care stuff. And
do you really?
And then biannually, yeah, I really do. I go for the Brazilians.
Oh my gosh.
Shelf likes it. Yeah. So, and then I also do like my facial IPL. So the pulse light, like if we're talking about physical self-care, it also has to do with like, relationships, right? Like I like trying to prevent basal cell carcinoma because my mom had skin cancer, and apparently IPL or pulse light can do that. And it also tones down the freckles that I get from the sun exposure. Although of course I wear SPF, which that takes time to put on every morning. Right.
Right.
So all the physical things, it matters. Right. But
okay, offside. You got to tell me where you're going, okay? Because I want to try it for the first time.
Which one? The IPL or the waxing?
Yeah, the IPL. I've never done that. Oh, the waxing scares me. I've done it once and it hurt like hell. And I'm like, why are people scared of acupuncture? Why are people scared of acupuncture?
Oh, acupuncture is way better. Yeah. IPL is like nothing. I mean, acupuncture is nothing compared to IPL. Acupuncture is so meaning nothing in terms of pain. Like IPL's, IPL actually is very uncomfortable, and so is waxing.
Oh my gosh. Now I don't want to go. What are you talking about?
It hurts. Yes, it is.
Okay, and that's self-care. Like, it's kind of ridiculous, guys.
I know. So that's why I was saying, how did we start this conversation? Right? I don't know if I would consider those things as self-care. I mean, they're more like maintenance, I would call them, because it helps me feel good after the fact.
Part of self-care, because it's like you care about how you look like and how you feel.
I do.
And I mean, let's be honest here. Our society is really based a lot on aesthetics, unfortunately, right? And as much as I try not to subscribe to it, I still do. Like, I like to wear like decent clothes when I go to work. Like, I don't want people to look like a riffraff,
Oh, for sure. And you know what? Here's the thing. Is even goal setting. I was reading in Atomic Habits by James Clear. He talks about making habits attractive. So because we're like inundated in social media, how to, sell or what's important to buy. And even our kids push us for brand names and all that kind of stuff. So it's wired into our brains, like this whole kind of concept of looking beautiful and buying beautiful things. So when you're trying to develop a new habit, perhaps it's a positive one for self-care. One of the things you want to do is make it attractive. So for example, buy a nice, really nice clothing outfit for yourself. If you are really uninterested in working out, but you just want to, look good. And that's a motivation. You put those clothes by your bedside. It's easy. He says, make it easy. So put it by your bedside. So it's like visible and easy and attractive. And then you're more likely to be drawn to that grabbing your sweats and putting on your nice running shoes and going for a walk, for example. So
yes,
creating habits and finding strategies on how to develop habits for self-care. That's positive self-care, right?
oh, you're totally like, it's been a while since I read that book. So I am now remembering. It's like, if you're trying to start going for runs, first day, don't even actually go for a run.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Just actually have the running shoes in front of you.
Yes. And,
like,
and
that's
take
day
the
one.
minute, exactly like you put it there. And it's like, you take the minute to just say, okay, this is the time that I would be allocating for running. I even say that, and I didn't know that this would be one of his concepts. It's great. I'll say that to patients who, for example, really want to establish a workout routine, perhaps for self-care. And I'll say, put aside an hour. Don't do anything in that hour except for sitting with yourself, and then add a minute every time you work out. Every time you sit in that space, add a minute of movement. Maybe you're standing there dancing, or you're walking on the spot. And then eventually you'll get so bored with yourself, you'll go out for a walk. You'll have the energy. If you're sitting with yourself peacefully, you'll kind of get that, boost of energy a little bit, and a good sense of boredom to say, okay, you know what, this is eventually I'm going to be working out for an hour in this, but now I'm just like,
wow.
Right. And
does it work?
It does work.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to add in my little 2 cents worth. Okay.
Yes.
So for me, if you told me that, just say, set an hour aside and do nothing first, I'd be like, not a chance. That's precious hour. So I'd be like, so for me, what would work better is like, let's just set aside to start 5 minutes.
Sure. Yes.
And
that's more Atomic Habits kind of exactly. Yes. And then add to it for sure.
So for me, it's like adding to it rather than having that hour. I'm like, what the hell, man? I could be totally doing that.
So that hour can be filled up, don't forget, with peaceful things, not necessarily,
No, I
could
get
sit
it.
and go and meditate, or you could listen to some music, read a magazine. It's just more just peaceful time. It's like you time for an hour every day that will eventually kind of get squeezed out into an exercise routine, and maybe half, right? Because if we can't, if in life you can't allocate an hour of that type of self-care, like exercise and sitting like peacefully without kind of having social media or TV kind of in front of you, what's wrong with us that we can't make that time? Like what is going on? Like, no, this is like a question I have, like, why do we do that to ourselves? What is it about us that we don't want to sit with ourselves peacefully?
Oh my gosh.
Right.
And you know what? I think this is such a beautiful and pertinent topic, because isn't it true that everyone's on a device and you're overstimulated and you don't even know it? So you don't even know what it's like to actually be calm, because you're now, getting the dopamine hits all day long going on your device. And so then there's a fear of like, oh no, I can't go without it because I'll be bored. And it's like, even my daughter will say that, oh my gosh, like I'm bored. I'm like, good.
Yeah. Right? That's what I say to my kids. Totally.
Like, that's great.
Like, Mommy, but the TV's not working. I don't know what's wrong. I really can't figure it out. It's no lie. Like, they probably think I'm lying, but I'm like, I really actually don't know what's wrong with the TV. And then their computers aren't charged. And so I'll say, good. Yes. Like, we have a ping pong table. Let's play ping pong, let's make time for other things. Honestly, like it's too much now. Devices, it's overdone. It is overdone. To the point where, I had arthritis from moving, but, osteoarthritis thing is genetic and part of, my makeup, and my hands hurt when I use the phone. So I actually just put the phone down because it actually hurts my hands, which is kind of good. I appreciate that my body is telling me no. So that's another thing that's in terms of self-care. It's like creating the space to really tune inward and listen to your body when it says no, right? Like there is a book, I haven't read it yet, but like When the Body Says No.
Oh, I love that book too. Yes. Thank you for the reminder. And it's so true, right? Because then this is also a mindset, because instead of saying, oh crap, my finger hurts and I can't do it. Oh my gosh, life is crap. Instead, you're like, what are my hands telling me?
Yeah.
What, these are symptoms, and it's your body giving you signs saying, hey, hello, slow down. Listen to me. And if you don't listen to me, I am just going to knock louder and louder until you are like fully stopped by me.
Right.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
But isn't it better if you don't, wait for that to happen and just
Of
be
course.
proactive, right? And so
Yes.
I love the mention of Atomic Habits, because I love Atomic Habits. James Cleary is brilliant. And one of the things that I was already doing, and I loved him articulating, like, oh, that's me, I do this. So it's also difficult to start habits when you're in the place of, oh my gosh, I don't have enough time in the day. My life is so full, I cannot do it. So he talks about the second point, which is, how do you stack habits? Meaning you already have a habit that you do with brainlessly, like brushing your teeth. Like, hopefully most of you out there are brushing your teeth every day, but I do twice a day. And you're supposed to brush twice a day at 2 minutes at a time. So that's 4 minutes, right? So if you're a person that loves to just sit in front of the TV and like lie down and eat bonbons, like maybe brushing your teeth could be a great opportunity to like do a little couple of squats. I actually do that. Or, if you hate stretching, it's like an opportunity to do I'll do some lunges when I'm brushing my teeth.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I won't tell you the multitasking I do when I'm brushing my teeth, but I do multitask too. Oh my goodness. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's great. It's a concept of layering. Absolutely. Or when you're working out, if you like watching Netflix, put the TV in front of your treadmill, right? There was a guy that he talked about in there where, they would, the Netflix would only be showing if he said he programmed his bike to only show Netflix or the TV if he was pedaling, and it would stop.
Oh yeah. Like the pedaling. Yes. So the pedaling is like powering the TV.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to bring up, I'm sorry I had to cut in, right? Like I'm sorry, because again, my little short-term memory, I'm like, I'm going to forget this point. So I have to jump in. So the piece about, when we layer so many things with our habits, then it's like, well, we don't want to overboard, because then that's hyperstimulating again. Right. Because, with Jay Shetty, who
love him.
Oh my gosh, what's his book? We're mentioning a lot of books.
It's the monk. Hang on a second.
Yes, yes, something monk. Speak like a monk. No, there was something.
They're so funny. Okay, so this is when you go grounded and you reach. So it's think like a monk. Think like a monk. Exactly. Which is what we need to do right now.
Think like a monk. I'm obviously not speaking like a monk.
No, thinking like in our like processing part of our brain rather than like the excitement and which blanks us. So that's okay. So go on. So you were saying in Jay Shetty's Think Like a Monk. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So just to counter the whole Atomic Habits, where I just mentioned literally about stacking one habit with brushing teeth. Well, in Think Like a Monk, Jay Shetty talks about how he would brush his teeth and do meditation while he's brushing his teeth. Right. So, but then to me, it's like, well, but that is a habit stacking, because you're taking the brushing teeth, but you're being mindful with brushing your teeth.
Fully. I will do that when I'm washing dishes.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I like the feeling of the soap on my hands. And I remember reading the book, since we're talking about books, Peace is Every Step by Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yes. Yeah. I remember.
And he talks about, rather than like fighting the things you have to do, like like the regular routines of things, you stay conscious and present and move through your 5 senses while you're doing it, and think gratitude. Or when you're walking, it's like kiss the ground with your feet, and you're like, with every step, you're literally thinking that. And I think it is important to layer, because part of self-care, it's a mindset shift. We wake up happier, and it's keeping that positive mental attitude, that fortitude, right? Of positive mental attitude. It's a definite continuous effort. Our brains are wired to think negative, that we're going to be attacked by a big scary bear. So every moment of every day, it's like reframing how you're seeing things. It does take effort. People think, why am I so negative? Like a lot of my patients will say that to me, like, why is my mindset where I see and hear everybody else is so positive. And I always stop them in their tracks. I'm like, no. Most people have a negative train in their brains. And when they've worked at it, they are then reframing. And it doesn't mean that the negative's not there. It's just that they are faster to catch it. It's also exercising your brain to shift with it, have a positive mindset shift, because
100%.
we are wired to be under threat in our minds. Like we're even, down to like I was saying earlier, like that instinctual concern that we're going to be eaten by a scary bear or tiger. Well, then now it's like the workforce, like we're worried we're going to be fired by our jobs, or that we won't have enough income to make the next paycheck, that kind of thing. So that negative wiring, it's like it's a behavior we've learned from our parents even. So it's kind of recognizing that wait a minute, like if we do, my sister talks about this, like a self-image scripting that talks about abundance and that we are enough and that we are capable. And then of course it takes work. We're not going to just sit on our butts. We're still working. And we think about all the things that we've accomplished in our life and focus more on those accomplishments. Right.
Well, but that's the problem. The problem is that people don't actually sit long enough to look at their accomplishments, because, once you accomplish something, it's like, okay, now what next? and so you don't even have that moment to self-reflect and really sit with your accomplishments and feel good about that. And I love what you're saying about, it is truly so that the primitive mind, our primitive brain, it's already preset. We have this predestined conversation of looking for threats, looking. And so we're more wired to be negative, and it takes conscious effort and our frontal lobes that has us reason and say, oh, wait a minute, actually, we're not in threat. Right? Because back in the day, in the caveman days, perhaps it is mostly living in your hindbrain, because you are literally living in nature. And every second of the day, you need to be looking out for those lions. Right.
Looking out for them. And then it's competition for space on Earth, even like competitive, like this is my land. No, this is my land, right? They're fighting.
Yes. Territorial.
So even with my children, they fight for attention. So I said, you know what, guys, it was an activity from another book that I'm reading that isn't applicable necessarily. I mean, it's definitely applicable for children, but it wasn't talking about it, but I applied it. And I thought, okay, guys, I need you to sit down, close your eyes. And I want you to think about times that you guys have had, 2 times you've had together recently where you're really enjoying each other's company. And then focus on that. And then now I want you to think about all the other times where you're not happy. Now I want you to squeeze out those times and think only about the positive times. How does that feel? And like you really go into your senses to feel those times. It's kind of like accomplishments, right? They've accomplished good behavior together. They're happy together because they do squabble a lot, right? For attention. And, kids do that anyhow. And in doing that, they were able to have this shift where they're like, I'm like, do you guys want to enjoy each other's company, or do you want to be in constant squabble? And they're like, we actually, at first they're kind of paused. I think their answer was going to be like, whatever, we don't like each other, in that moment. But they realized that, wait a minute, like if we squeeze out this like repeated pattern and squeeze out the negative, focus more on the feelings of the positive and then work on that, it's actually a lot smoother. Life is smoother when we're getting along. And then you can apply that to even just your thoughts, your negative thought patterns. You can squeeze them out by focusing on the positive ones. Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. And I don't know. No, it's completely awesome. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I would use the term squeeze out the negative. I would use the term it's like quietly acknowledge that it's there, sure. And it's not bad or wrong. Because again, we are so good at self-judgment. It's like, it's there. It's that primitive brain. It's just there. We're wired. Right. So it's like, okay, but we don't want to live in that primitive brain. So how can we tie it back up? It's like, how do we come back into ourselves? And I couldn't help but I was staying in my brain thinking, wow, you're a highly evolved parent, man.
I'm trying to create peace.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm like, wow. But I don't have 2 kids, but even with the 1 kid, I'm like, oh, well, maybe I could do that. But then for those of you that are listening and saying, this is so irrelevant to me because I don't even have a kid and I'm dying to have a kid. So you guys should just shut up and be grateful that you have kids that squabble. Right. So I'm very sensitive to that and saying
100%. Yes.
But going back to that, it's like, well, then let's look at that primitive brain that comes up, because that primitive brain has us compare ourselves to others.
Yes.
And here's the truth. A lot of you guys who know us, it's like, hello, we both actually had really, I don't know if I'll call it traumatic, but we certainly had really big challenges, daunting, and struggles, trying to conceive. And so now that we're finally here, one way of looking at it is, okay, we're not even allowed or to give ourselves permission to complain in any way, because we should be lucky and grateful we have our kids. Well, you know what? I am so super grateful, and yet I'm a human. And sometimes I'm going to have a little mini tantrum in my head and go, it's not fair. Why is she totally, hating me and telling me she hates me? And then I'll sit back and go, you know what? So great that she can articulate.
Yes, it's important to have the feelings and to imagine she suppressed that, right? And there was no communication of it.
Yeah. So then let's bring it back to a person that doesn't even have a baby yet, or maybe you have one and you want a second one. And I've even witnessed women that have had multiple kids and are dying to have a third kid. And then didn't Tanya and I interview a doula who naturally conceived 7 kids.
Yes.
And we had this, I know, is this bad that we're going to tell people? But it doesn't matter. We had the assumption
that it was easy for her to conceive.
Yeah, because she has 7 kids.
Right. And then our second podcast with her, she came back and said, by the way, I actually took me 3 years.
4 years.
Oh, 4 years.
4 years between a kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kids. So
so you can never, you can always assume, but is that a recommended thing? Absolutely not. So always know that people have journeys that they might not always express. You don't try your best to not make assumptions. I mean, it's one of those things that we do naturally, but we've got to work on asking more and listening more, being present more, not only with ourselves, but with other people, to learn their stories and not compare or judge. Recognize they had different upbringings, they're different people, they have different journeys. And the best thing you can do is listen and empathize, right?
Yeah. And recognize that part of your self-care is that sometimes it's too much and overwhelming to listen to others. So you might as well that's where you can retreat and honor yourself and honor your own story and sit with that and not worry about, having to appease other people.